Part 2. The desire for resolution is sometimes so strong that, if unfulfilled, it can lead to serious consequences. One such consequence is poltergeist phenomena. A poltergeist is thought to be present when objects, some of which can be alarmingly big and heavy, move, fall, and even become airborne of their own volition. Parapsychologists and other researchers have conducted extensive studies of poltergeist events. They have found one element common to the majority of these instances: the presence of a female, usually a girl in her pre-teens or teens, or sometimes a young woman in her 20s. Researchers have noted the female's presence without any true understanding of its connection to the phenomena of self-propelled objects. We believe the poltergeist is misunderstood. In our opinion, a poltergeist is most often not a separate soul or entity tossing objects about at random. Rather, the poltergeist effect is rooted in the suppression and denial of anger, one of the strongest of all emotions. And what has always been the most unacceptable emotion for a girl or woman to display in societies all around the globe? Anger, of course. From our work in alternative therapy, we know that we store anger in the subconscious mind, also known as the emotional body. We offer the following as an alternative explanation for poltergeist phenomena. When a girl's or woman's anger, suppressed and denied in this lifetime and in many past lives, reaches a certain intensity, it can no longer be contained within the person's own subconscious. It then explodes outward with enough force to move even huge physical objects. Rage expressed in such a manner would most certainly appear random or chaotic to the conscious mind. That's because the expression is at the emotional, non-rational level. The female involved is unaware of her participation in creating the phenomena. Such females are consistently observed to be subdued, obedient, good girls. They have been figuratively swallowing their rage for a long time. The poltergeist effect, then, is an extreme and frightening form of passive-aggressive behavior. It is an unavoidable signal from the emotional body that this person, at least on some deeper level, wants her rage and pain to be acknowledged and healed. It is far beyond the scope of the afterlife healing circle, however, to offer the depth and extent of healing needed in cases of poltergeist phenomena. These women very much need something effective in addressing their wounded emotional bodies. Far more terrifying than poltergeist phenomena are those documented cases of possession. This phenomenon is so baffling that science cannot explain it and therefore tends to dismiss it. The Church explains possession as the means by which the devil or his minions corrupt good people and turn them against God. We have our own theories about possession. We are skeptical of the terms diabolic and demonic. We do agree that something or someone invades the physical body of an incarnated soul, but rather than being satanic, that something is what we would call a denial spirit. The denial spirit denies creation and God's light and unconditional love. Explaining how denial spirits originally came to be within creation is way beyond the scope of this book. Those interested in this topic may want to read the series of books by Sundar Rohan. 9. It's enough to say that denial spirits exist, even if the rational part of the mind finds them and the havoc and devastation they wreak too incredible to acknowledge without first-hand experience, and sometimes even with that experience. Denial spirits are not enlightened or loving, obviously. Given half a chance, a denial spirit will invade a physical body that does not belong to it as a way to deny the existence of the soul to which that physical vehicle does belong. Denial spirits get that opportunity when we open ourselves up to the universe without realizing the full implications of what we are doing or without knowing how to protect ourselves. Consider Tammy and her friend. As a result of opening themselves up unprotected, they contacted more than just Tammy's grandfather. They wrestled briefly with the denial spirit. The clear feeling in their stomachs was that spirit's attack on their solar plexus chakra, which is the power center in the human electromagnetic energy field. The spirit was testing to find out whether either of them would yield her physical body to it. The entity came close to success with Tammy. That's why she thought she had fallen asleep. For an instant, that denial spirit had gained a foothold in her physical body, forcing part of her own awareness to vacate. It is also beyond this book's scope to discuss details of the possession process. It is worth emphasizing, however, that no soul can be displaced from a physical body without that soul's acquiescence. Souls allow denial spirits to take over their physical bodies because they feel helpless and therefore believe that they are powerless to stop it. Tammy and her friend ultimately were able to resist the denial spirit because they had enough sense of their own power not to give in to it. Many people do not prove so resilient under attack. Geraldo Rivera devoted the May 15, 1990 episode of his show to the topic of possession. The guest described what it was like to live with a son who was possessed. "You have no will. It's just total fear. It controlled me," she said, referring to the being that possessed her child's body and bullied and terrified her. We believe her when she said she felt she was being controlled by something outside of self. Control over other souls is precisely what a denial spirit wants. It desires control over others because control, not evil, as traditionally defined, is the true opposite of love. Our Creator loves us without judgments, standards, or expectations unconditionally, in other words. As souls created out of unconditional love, we possess free will that is truly and totally free, regardless of the conditions imposed by society and its various institutions. The talk show guest thus participated in handing over control of her life to that denial entity. So did her son, though to a far greater degree. Similar to girls and women who display the poltergeist effect, neither of them acted consciously in handing over control. They reached the point of allowing a denial spirit into their lives and even their physical being after many lifetimes of trying to learn a big lesson about free will and where true responsibility for self begins and ends. God finally got Moses' attention by enveloping a bush with flames that did not consume it. Many others also require an extreme experience before they will take the hint and wise up. Chapter 2 Healing, the Circle, and the Sacred Spiritual have been linked together in societies past and present around the world. One of the few academic studies to examine the circle, focusing on the association between spiritual healing and circles in art, was published as an art history doctoral thesis by Laura Kirby, PhD. In it, she writes, the circle is associated with such properties as divinity, strength, protection, benediction, endlessness, power, virtue, the universe, soul, movement, balance, wholeness, sacred space and wisdom, across Tibetan Buddhism, shamanism, and the visions of Hildegard of Bingen. The circle is associated with spiritual healing because of its singular ability to represent these qualities. 1. She outlines how the circle is a spiritual healing archetype is found in the shamanistic cultures of North America's indigenous peoples, such as in the Navajo sand paintings or medicine wheel. In Asia, in the Tibetan Buddhist Kalachakra mandala is the wheel of time. And in Western European Christianity, in the visions of 12th century German abbess Hildegard of Bingen, in the labyrinth, and in the rose windows of Gothic cathedrals. According to restoratevejustice.org, indigenous peoples worldwide have used the circle to address community issues and concerns for millennia. Wood or stone circles can be found all over Europe, with some sites dating back 5,000 years or more. 2. The most famous of European circles is, of course, Stonehenge, on the plains near Salisbury, England. One of the most intriguing possible uses of this ancient structure is the theory of two archaeologists, Timothy Dirwell and Geoffrey Wainwright. They suggest that uses for Stonehenge possibly evolved from a prehistoric observatory or ancient royal burial ground to a healing shrine similar to Lourdes in France, drawing ailing people who wanted to be made whole again. After about 2300 BC the emphasis changes and it is a focus for the living, a place where specialist healers and the healthcare professionals of their age looked after the bodies and souls of the sick and infirm. 3. They cite the presence of bluestones, excavated and hauled to the site with extraordinary effort throughout many years and regarded by those who mined them as containing sacred healing properties, as a sign of the healing purpose of Stonehenge. The circular shape of the structure also supports their theory. The bluestones were arranged in a double circle and later surrounded by a circle of larger Sarsen stones. Stonehenge and other stone or wood circles are three-dimensional replicas of what Laura Kirby found in her review of circle art. The circle is a two-dimensional symbol as the shape that best represents wholeness, and wholeness is what healing is all about, says Kirby, now a family daycare educator. In her thesis, she also points out that the words healing and sacred or holy have common linguistic roots. The verb to heal, the adjectives whole and holy all stem from the same Old Saxon root. Healing can, in the light of this evidence, be a making whole, which in itself is an act that is holy. Throughout the thesis, healing will therefore mean a return towards a state of wholeness or an ideal state of being. 4. We cannot be certain, but we suspect that an ideal state of being is entirely subjective, and depends on each us of to define it for ourselves. We do know from our work as energy healers that when any kind of spiritual or emotional healing takes place, then emotional, spiritual, and even physical pain lessen or depart altogether, providing resolution to a greater or lesser extent. This certainly transpired for all of those whose afterlife healing circle stories we discuss in this book. We have already mentioned that as we practice the afterlife healing circle, we engage the whole self. Our meaning here is neither symbolic nor metaphorical. Many people think of the whole self as body-mind or body-mind-spirit. These ways of defining self, however, omit the emotional part of our being, which is fully 1/4 of the whole self. Our version of the afterlife healing circle won't work unless the physical body, the mental body, the spiritual body, and the emotional body are all active. Later we will explain in greater depth how each part of self contributes to the success of the afterlife healing circle. But the very act of bringing the whole self to the circle and using all of it helps make circle participants whole. We cannot ever hope to be whole if we live out of only part of our being. European circle traditions may have been lost to mainstream society, but indigenous peoples use the circle to this day for a variety of reasons, and its use has spread beyond these cultures to many corners of society. Initially in Canada and then in the United States and other parts of the world, the talking circles of the natives have been adapted to the legal system as justice circles. In these instances, the circle is more than simply a space for victims and perpetrators of crimes to meet and seek some form of restitution resolution. The wider community also participates, because the crime is regarded as harming not only the victim but also the fabric of the community. Instead of the confrontational approach typical of a trial in a court of law, coming together in a circle enables those involved to experience each other not as adversaries but as fellow human beings. 5. Everyone in the circle, the victim and victim's family, the offender and the offender's family, and community representatives, who can be members of the mainstream legal system or others, gets a chance to speak. The process is designed not to exact punishment as revenge, but to bring healing and understanding to both victim and offender, and to empower the community by becoming involved in determining the outcome of a particular case and in addressing underlying problems that may have led to a facilitated commission of the crime. 6. RestorativeJustice.org has listed these attributes of the circle, which we have also found to be true as we practice our version of the afterlife healing circle. Circles draw on our best values. Circles help participants respond from one's best self. Circles build community. Circles create space for deep listening and being heard. Circles generate mutual understanding and respect. Circles honor all voices equally. Circles make decisions by consensus. Circles honor the gifts, knowledge, talents, and experiences that each participant brings. 7. The collaborative rather than confrontational thinking behind these circle principles was also evident in South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, established in 1995 after the fall of the apartheid government. During hearings around the country that began the next year, victims and perpetrators of human rights abuses gathered to tell their stories, which were recorded for posterity. A small minority of perpetrators even received amnesty for their crimes instead of punishment, depending on the circumstances. The aim was to avoid an extended cycle of violent retribution on all sides and grant those harmed by human rights violations the dignity of being heard and witnessed by the entire community, including their aggressors. 8. RestorativeJustice.org states, participating in circles is inherently transformative, because we experience the world from more perspectives than our own. Drawing on diverse knowledge and experiences, circles generate options and solutions that are often outside the box of conventional thinking and that often go beyond what one person could generate on their own. 9. Something unexpected and remarkable arose out of the healing circles that Meg Jordan, PhD, RN, CWP, began in 1999. Meg is Department Chair and Professor of Integrative Health Studies and Somatic Psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies. She was inspired to set up her healing circles by the justice circles of the First Nations in Canada. Her circles evolved through several format changes, eventually becoming a monthly gathering of a group of Western and alternative healing practitioners. Included are physicians, on rare occasions psychiatrists, psychologists, chiropractors, naturopaths, Reiki and Ayurveda practitioners, shamans, herbalists, aromatherapists, and others. The focus of their circle is a patient with a chronic condition who has spent a lot of time and money on allopathic and alternative treatments but has not obtained relief. Meg says, "There's no shortage of patients who say to me, I've had multiple layers of chronic conditions. If I could really have 2 hours free with 7 practitioners all at one time, I will jump on that." As restoratejustice.org notes, Meg and the other practitioners in her circle found the experience to be a community builder. As the practitioners became better acquainted with each other's expertise in the circle and grew to trust each other, they freely deferred to one another when they realized that a particular patient would benefit more from a different approach. They also began referring clients to each other outside of the circle. Meg says that the patients who have been the subjects of these circles have appreciated the members' honesty in assessing whether or not their form of treatment was helpful to them. Brianna, the intuitive counselor and teacher of the circle, points out, even though we may not feel it on a practical level, the circle allows us to soften, to become more receptive to seeing things that we might not otherwise see, and hearing things that we might not otherwise hear. Meg's circles usually address physical issues, but that does not preclude aiding other ailing parts of self. She recalls one circle when a shaman noted the disruption in the patient's auric field and added, "I'm just going to pray to the hole in your heart and see where you have been trying to grieve." Suddenly the patient began sobbing and said, "No one's ever recognized that within me before." The psychiatrist in the circle, who had been rolling his eyes minutes earlier, had them opened instead. Previously he had disparaged energy healers, yet he became one of their biggest advocates because of what he witnessed in the healing circle. "As a medical anthropologist, I've come to respect energy healing work so much," Meg says. "We are glad to know that more and more members of the allopathic medical and allied professions are open to the benefits of energy healing. Our version of the afterlife healing circle very much involves energy, which we will redefine in order to explain its connection to the circle, to healing, to spirituality, and to love, which we have already mentioned is present in the afterlife healing circle and is that which opens us to be more receptive when we are in the circle." The preceding are just a few of the examples of how the circle is being used today as a more community-based and community-directed alternative to traditional ways of doing things, whether it's an alternative to the courts, to time-consuming and costly sequential medical visits, or to redressing the wounds of an entire nation polarized by racial laws. Meg's circles, for example, are considered experimental efficiency models, and she hopes to compile evidence of their efficacy. As such, these circles have not been integrated into the healthcare insurance reimbursement system. "I don't think anyone wants to go that route with it," she adds. We understand that sentiment entirely. Meg's circles have become a way for adherents and practitioners of many Western and complementary healing disciplines to transcend the isolation they experience in their practices and come together to help a patient and enjoy a community of equals. According to restoratejustice.org, there are at least 20 circumstances in which the use of the circle as an alternative for problem solving at a personal or community level is appropriate. These include places such as youth centers, businesses in the workplace, prisons, churches, non-profits, and elder care centers, as well as subjects such as community planning, inmate re-entry into society, veterans' needs, environmental cleanup, recovery from trauma and grief, and support of the dying and their families in hospice. 10 But in all of these examples of how the circle can be a helpful, even trailblazing alternative, there is no mention of using circles to reach out to the other side, to speak with those not in physical bodies. Our version of the circle is a lot further out of the mainstream than other circles. It all depends on how we define community, however. We believe that community is incomplete if it does not include those who are not in physical bodies, the other side. We talk all the time with our spirit guides, who play a key role in the afterlife healing circle, and who most definitely do not have bodies that we perceive as physical. We also work with non-physical beings during our energy healing sessions. We consider them our colleagues and beloved friends, and they are no more imaginary than we are. The other side is a lot closer than many of us realize or perhaps care to acknowledge. Anyone, in fact, can speak to the so-called dead and the not yet born. Later in this book we recount stories of people who did not set out to communicate with the other side, but nonetheless received all manner of communications from souls not in bodies that we consider physical. We will explain how to identify and enhance these intuitive communications, because they happen constantly, even if we do not recognize them as such, and because we need them for the afterlife healing circle to succeed. According to the well-known Western European myth of Camelot, King Arthur gathered his knights at a circular table. He chose that particular table configuration to foster a sense of equality among his knights by eliminating the head and foot of the more common rectangular table shape. This inevitably produced tension between the ideal of social equality, as embodied in the Round Table, and the reality of the decidedly non-egalitarian political hierarchy that Arthur led as monarch. Unlike the circle, Camelot did not endure. Today, we love the circle as a group healing practice for the same reason Arthur did: the shape gives all participants equal standing. As Jean Shinoda Boland writes in her book The Millionth Circle, a circle is non-hierarchical. This is what equality is like. This is how a culture behaves when it listens and learns from everyone in it. 11. The circle puts into action our belief in the fundamental spiritual equality of all created souls. When we circle, the lines of resistance disappear and we are in flow, Meg pointed out. When we stay in hierarchy, we stay in top-down authoritative lines of inquiry, and deep healing is not facilitated. We agree. Healing is far more complete and powerful if we play an active role in it. So is our connection to Spirit, to God. We do not fare well if we outsource it to others. We have made and are now trying to rectify two huge mistakes. First, we divorced healing from spirituality and tried to leave it solely in the domain of science. It's a classic example of trying to live and function out of only one part of our being, in this case, the mental body. Something huge is missing from the purely scientific model of healing, as many scientists and physicians now acknowledge and are trying to change. Second, and even more insidious and harmful, we outsourced our connection to God and spirituality to top-down hierarchies. Under these systems emerged a class of anointed or appointed priests, pastors, lamas, gurus, masters, and so on, who presumably possessed greater spiritual connections or pull than everyone else. Holding themselves out as closer to God, the divine, or nirvana, or however each particular religion or faith expresses it, these spiritual overseers then insisted on mediating and dictating to the rest of us the conditions of our relationship with God. Source: Allah, Universal Mind. Choose any comfortable label. We prefer the word God because it's concise and to the point. There is an old saying along the lines that if we allow others to do something for us, eventually they will do something to us. Never has this proven truer than in spiritual matters. Think back to the recent sexual abuse scandals in the Catholic Church around the globe. Other faiths are by no means immune from such travesties. For example, polygamist Warren Jeffs of the Fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints will spend the rest of his days in prison for raping a 14-year-old child and facilitating more such rapes of underage girls. And in 1993, 80-plus members of the Branch Davidians remained with David Koresh to perish in a fire near Waco, Texas. Similarly, more than 900 members of the People's Temple obeyed the order of their leader, Jim Jones, to kill themselves in Guyana in 1978. Granted, these are extreme examples, but they are the logical outcome of handing over ultimate spiritual authority to anyone or anything other than ourselves, and then hoping to ride to heaven or nirvana or wherever on that person's or institution's ostensibly purified coattails. This is dangerous because it strips us of a great deal of our native spiritual power and transfers that power illegitimately outside of ourselves. Loss of personal power and authority is why parents allowed a church leader sexual access to their young daughters. It's why boys and girls remained silent when parish priests sexually abused them. It's why people stayed to die in the flames or drank the Kool-Aid that ended their physical bodies. They gave their spiritual power and authority to someone outside of themselves and thus became vulnerable to abuse and exploitation. A wise rabbi once told his listeners that the kingdom of God is within. Jesus was not referring to a physical structure like a church, a mosque, a temple, or an ashram. He was talking about what is within the self, inside the heart and spirit that truly defines who we are as physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual beings. Too many of us, even those who profess to be Christians, act as though we don't believe him. We look everywhere except within for a relationship or connection with the divine. Investing our trust externally, we give over our power to the rabbi or the priest, the pastor or the imam, the Lama or the Guru, just as we have handed over healing authority to physicians or political authority to elected politicians. Tragically and inevitably, some among them betray us. They cannot help it. They are human, just as we are, and despite all pretensions to the contrary, they don't know anything more about the divine or healing or running a country than the rest of us, and they are no better connected or more insightful than we. No person and no institution has the right or authority to stand between or define our relationship, or lack thereof, with God's source divine universe. No one. Our relationship with God, or whatever you wish to call it, is one of the most critical relationships we will ever have. It is far too central to our well-being and wholeness to vest it in someone else's jurisdiction. It is ours alone to nurture and grow, although we are certainly free to seek out help and advice along the way. That's why God didn't stop with Adam in fleshing out creation. We are here to help each other, not step on each other's spiritual toes or order each other's spiritual business. It just so happens that the Afterlife Healing Circle is a moving and beautiful way to help others in need. We, the authors, Jana and Candace, did not start out believing in the fundamental spiritual equality of all created souls. We each came to this place by experiencing our own personal equivalent of that burning yet unconsumed bush. Our life experiences opened us to a greater reality and to reclaiming our personal power so that we could exercise it in a loving, giving manner, such as conducting, participating in, and promoting the Afterlife Healing Circle through this book. The following chapter relates Soulmate. This is a part of Zindagi Ki Roshni consultancy. It has been established for those who have lost someone and for those who are very sad in their life. About 100 PDF books and 20 short audio books of this topic will be sent to those who join it. This data will be sent to their email or WhatsApp. If you want to join this organization, then please send WhatsApp message to this number.